Hello again and welcome back. So I did a Gentoo installation video a few days back, and indeed that covers to install it. However, our installed system is still very empty. It doesn't have much of anything in it. It doesn't have a desktop, it doesn't have a window manager, it doesn't have Xorg, it doesn't have drivers. You get the idea. So what we're going to do today is going to be to cover. How do you configure it? What kinds of things do you need? And of course, this comes down to how do you want to configure it, because it's your system. You can do what you want. Do you only want terminal system? If you want so, you can have it. You don't need to install desktop. You don't need to install window manager. If you only want terminal, you can only have a terminal. And in that case, you might want to consider installing tmux, which should be as simple as doing an emerge ask tmux. And that's that. That would install tmux for you. On the other hand, you might want a GUI, which is what we are going to be doing, and in that case we are going to install a window manager. You might want desktop. What to install is up to you. I'm not going to go over how to configure your desktop, that's a separate thing. I'm going to go over how to configure these basic things you may or may not need within the Gentoo installation. So indeed, if you want like tmux and just that, you can just do tmux. If you want like vim, you can do vim. If you want emacs, you can do emacs. By the way, you can't run emacs as a window manager, so that's something. Uh, but basically, you can install things as you need. If you only need terminal stuff, then you can leave yours to terminal. You don't need to do any of the things, and really, you can pretty much just know that all you have to do is install your software if you're on these terminals. So, as you can see here on the left, and probably have been able to see, we have the Intel microcode page. Now, if you're an AMD person, you would have an AMD microcode page instead. And basically, these microcodes are something you want to have. Probably it improves your performance, it makes things better. So you want to have microcode if possible. And you want to make sure you have the kernel options enabled. You want to make sure you have your initrums. You want to make sure you have your, microcode loading support. And indeed, as you can see here, our recurrent kernel options here are the intrums support and the microcode support and the Intel one specifically. So you want to make sure you have what you need enabled. If you're using AMD, it would be AMD microcode loading support. So make sure that's in your kernel. If something that we're going to be covering today isn't in your kernel, then you can simply go back and reconfigure your kernel by going into the user, src, and Linux directory and running a new make menu config and then, compile it as you did when you installed Gentoo. Just make sure you actually mount your boot partition. But that's really that. Also, you want to make sure you have you want to absolutely ensure you have your boot partition mounted before you go into doing the micro installation. So now we want to move on to actually getting this done. So what they want to do is, it might mention here that it's want to install the package Intel microcode. However, there's some one thing that you want to do first. And we can see the term in terms here, as it says here, we want to make sure we enable this flag because it means it's automatically going to put out in terms, which means we don't have to configure our grub or anything else, and it makes things a lot more easy. So what we want to do is add this into our package. So I want to nano or vim or whatever you want to use. You can install anything you need at this point. If you want to use vim instead, you can install it and use vim. I'm using nano because I like nano, and we are going to go into etc portage package.use, and then we want to make a file here. It doesn't really matter what you call it, but we'll call it Intel microcode because it's the package name, it makes sense. Now you could just have a single file do all of everything, but I like doing it single package or single file per certain use flag for package, if that makes sense. So what you want to do here is you want to type in the system error Intel microcode here. So I want to take this. We want to take that. And then we want to add that flag, and that's initrums flag. You need to enable this manually, but I would recommend doing so. It makes life a lot more easy. So do that in it means it makes the actual file for the interims automatically, which is going to save you a lot of time. And now we can actually run this. And as you can see, we're installing this. Now I want to make sure we check that actually our interns flag is enabled, and it is enabled. So that's good, we want that. Now I want to do Y and let it install its thing. And after it's done installing, we should be done to go. And now it's going to install that, and after that it's going to install Microcode, which should not take a long time. It's not a long thing, it's a very small file it's installing. But yeah, we want to make sure we get this installed, we want to make sure we have the interest flag, and this what it's going to do is it's going to install the Microcode package, and it's going to make us an actual Microcode CPIO or a Microcode file thing. So yeah, this is something you do want to do, and with that, I'll let this compile. I'll once we're done with compiling this, I'll come back. So now we're back. It has finished installing, and as you can see here, uh, the Microcode is there. It's installed, and as you can see here, it took our boot partition as being at boot. This is important. You need to have your boot partition mounted before you do any of this. But yes, now we have actually got that. So now, as you can see here, there will be some additional things here. However, we should be able to just reconfigure grub. So, if you do mkconfig command, and we should be able to find our Intel image. And indeed, we found it. So now we actually have Microcode enabled. It's fine. It does give a warning about OS Prober, but that's because we don't have OS Prober enabled. If you want to enable that, you can. Now, as you can see here, we now actually have this, so our microcode is done. It's finished. So as long as you can enable the initramps flag, you don't need to do any of this stuff. This is only if you don't enable that flag, but I would absolutely recommend enabling that flag to begin with. It makes things easy, because otherwise you'll have to manually turn it through this, then you'll have to input in grab, and it becomes a pain. So makes things easier if you just you use the initramps flag, have your initramps set up, and function. If you don't have any trumps, if you want to run without it, there is an alternate method, and that you can find down here. New method without any trumps. This only works this for a bit, so I won't take it into account. But yeah, you can run this thing here as well. If you don't have any trumps, you can run through this. But in trumps is the easier way to do it, so keep it in mind. And I'm going to focus on the assumption that we do have any trumps. So yeah, and if you don't have any trumps yet and you want to have one, you can make it. I showed in my station video how to do it with Rocket. You can still go and do it. So that's the microcode. It was easy enough. Just make sure you enable in package.use. In this file, you want to make sure you actually do this and you enable, the actual intrams flag for the package. And as soon as you're done with that, you can just install the package and reconfigure grab, and you'll be done. And that's all there is to it. It's as simple as that. Now for AMD, so if you go, AMD Microcode Gentoo, I imagine it would be fairly similar. So yeah, you want to install the thing again, and that pretty much seems to cover it all. So you just want to, with AMD, you literally just want to install it and, prepare firmware and stuff. It's a bit different, it seems. But yeah, you want to look at this article if you're using AMD. It seems to have 3 extra steps, but besides that, it's fine. Just make sure you have everything that's required enabled, and with Intel it's very simple. Now we want to move on to our NVIDIA section. So we know our actual Intel Microcode, and now we of course want to get our NVIDIA drivers up. We want to have drivers to use for a graphics card, because of course if you're using AMD, once again you want to look at the AMD wiki entry for Radeon, and that explains how you do it. The thing is, that's all in kernel, so you don't really have anything except for Xorg and that kernel stuff for Radeon graphics. But look at the wiki page for Radeon to know what it is you need in your kernel, and make sure you enable all of those things, and then just go through with the Xorg section. Let's begin with our NVIDIA drivers, however. And also, if you're using like Intel drivers, there's some special stuff with it as well. Though it's once again very simple. The NVIDIA ones are the ones that are most complicated, and even these ones are really simple. So the Gentoo driver installation is very easy, it's very good. So the thing is, we're not emerging the drivers here. Instead, we want to make sure about certain things. So we want to go, if you have legacy hardware, you want to make sure you do, make sure that you are getting this dealt with. But besides that, you don't worry about it. Instead, you want to make sure your kernel has everything enabled. So you want to make sure you have enabled loadable module support, which you should have. You want to make sure you have some MTRR enabled. As I mentioned in my installation, I had disabled because my graphics needed it. Then you also want to make sure here VGA arbitration enabled, and this even be top level message hardware thing. And you also want to make sure you have your AGP support enabled. So it's important to all of these. Once again, if you don't have some of this configured yet, go reconfigure it. It's easy enough. Then you also want to disable the in-kernel drivers, and you want to make sure you actually have this NVIDIA whatever disabled. And you want to only enable the simple frame buffer support. You don't want to have any of this stuff enabled. And if it says NVIDIA or Novell, you don't want that disabled in the kernel. And you want to make sure you have these two things enabled, as I mentioned. So you want to have this marking this thing as generic frame buffer enabled, and you want to make sure you have the simple frame buffer support enabled. Besides that, your kernel will be done, and we can move on to configuring it. So now really it's a straight up moving into Xorg. So we are going to go on to our Xorg section. There's a few more things back here after that, but we want to actually go on to this one. So here's our Xorg guide. So as you can see, it's Xorg guide, and we can move down here and we can find what we need. Once again, you want to make sure your event interface enabled in your kernel. You want to make sure you actually have, once again, this firm support devices enabled, and you want to disable all of this stuff except for the UEFI one if you're using UEFI. If you're not using UEFI, you disable everything. Now you want to go further down and enable this basic console support. You need that, and you need to do the firm buffer console support enabled. And that's really all there is to it. For the general Xorg, now if you're using Intel, you want to see the kernel section of the article. And if you're using AMD, you want to look at this AMD stuff, and you want to make sure all of this is enabled. Besides that, you can just go into NVIDIA, and you can see here there's 2 drivers available, and there's an open source option. This requires you enabling this stuff on the drivers, but you probably want to do the proprietary one because it's simply better. But if you want Novio, then you can use this one. And take note that Novio is significantly slower. Like if you have anything even remotely modern, it's going to be a huge bottleneck if you get the Novio version. On the other hand, if you're running like an NVIDIA Great GeForce 500 something, then Nuvia will be fine. But if you're running like anything even remotely recent, then you want to use the proprietary ones. Next section. So I want to actually configure our make.conf to match what we need. So there's 2 variables we need. It's video cards, and that's it first thing up our video card type. And then we also want to do some make our input devices. So I want to begin by just going there. So I want to nano dash etc, that is not intended to be capitals, nano dash etc dash portage dash make.conf. And in here we want to do a bunch of stuff. So we want to make sure this is enabled. I have once again copied this over, so I already have this stuff. But you want to manually set video cards equals NVIDIA or Radeon or Novell or whatever you're using, or Intel or etc, etc. You want to make sure you have the correct thing enabled here. In our case, NVIDIA. You want to type in this line here, and you also want to do this input devices. So you want to make sure any input device you have, you want to put this here. So I have a lib input, so that covers stuff like mouse, keyboard, etc. You also want to do joystick if you have like a a gamepad or a joystick or something. And I also have Wacom because I have a graphics tablet, so from Wacom. So you want to enable the things you need here. You can find, there's a command to find all of these, and you can run this command here to find what is and isn't enabled. So now if you actually quit this, we can see we actually have these enabled. And I believe there's a way to actually check what we don't have enabled as well, but I have no clue what that is, I guess, so we're just gonna leave it at that. But yeah, you want to make sure you actually have these things set up. You want to make sure your input devices set up. You want to make sure you have your video cards enabled, because that's going to determine what your actual Xorg is going to install into your directory. So what we want to do is once we're done with this, we have, set our NVIDIA setting or radio setting or whatever. We just want to we want to install this basically. We want to install our Xorg server. And what you will see here is the package we're going to install. Now we want to first, we need to operate our config, so we need to do dispatch conf. And we need to do a q, and then we need to do a new, and that will cover that. Of course, you can read a lot of stuff if you want, but I'm not going to. And then we need to run this emerge command again. And what that's going to do is actually install things. Now we can see what we actually have here. So we have, our usual X input stuff, etc., etc., Xorg server. However, if you look here, we have NVIDIA drivers in here. So by enabling it by video cards thing in the actual Microcode, we are telling it to install NVIDIA drivers, and that's what it does. So make sure to enable that correctly. If you're using Radeon, enable Radeon, and so on. And we also want to have lib input stuff. As you can see, we have our lib Wacom here, and we have our x86 input Wacom, and so on. We can see we actually have our Wacom inputs installed because we set it there. We also have our other joystick set, our general X inputs things, just to make our keyboard and mice work. You get the idea. So you want to make sure you have everything enabled there that you need. That really covers that. Xorg installation automatically installs everything as long as you have those set in your make.conf. And if you messed up the first time, you can go back into your make.conf and you can re-enable all of those things and re-update your things, and Xorg will install those things after that. So don't worry if you mess up once, you can always try again. Though you won't end up with the GUI that works, but you'll be fine. Just make sure you actually install all of those things correctly. Now let's merge this. Now we're going to have to wait a bit, so I'll once again leave you to wait, and once it's installed again, we will have a function Xorg, and I'll be coming back and we'll continue configuring the rest of what we need. So now we actually have our Xorg installed, and that means there's our drivers installed. However, they are not fully stopped yet. We still need to do things. And before we do anything else, we need to update our environment, so we'll do precisely that. So let's update our environment. And now we should be able to continue. Now, there's one thing I want to do before anything else, and that's this. I want to make it so it's short again. And since we have done that, we want to make sure we actually enable the NVIDIA driver. So we'll have to do mod probe and NVIDIA. And now it is actually enabled. And that means we now actually have a functional NVIDIA driver, and this should be set up. And since it's the case, that's fine. However, we need to still configure X server, so we don't have the X driver installed, set and stuff, but our X server isn't yet set up. So we want to make sure we actually, okay, I'm on the wrong window. We want to make sure we nano, and we want to modify this file. And we want to copy paste what's here. So you want to set, once again, it's going to be different for different devices, but for NVIDIA, it's like this. You want to make sure you're actually selecting, your section device, and you're actually configuring it to actually point to your NVIDIA driver and your NVIDIA identifier. It seems we need to make a directory. So we need to make take this directory, and you want to make that. So you want mkdir. Now you want to go back into our nano command. Now we should be able to copy paste our things inside. Oh god, I forgot to copy it. Oh wow. So you copy this stuff and you paste it in there, then you save, and now it should be able to save. And now it's saved, we are all fine. Now what you should probably do here is make a user. So you want to do the user add command. So we want to make our user at this point so we can actually log into Xorg as our user. So I want to do user add g. They want to do users. We want to do audio as well for audio to work. Then we want to do video, because as it says in our here, if we not here here, we need to make sure we actually have this at the video group. So we want to make sure we have that enabled. Then we want to just dash bin dash bash, so we are setting up our terminal as, or not our terminal, but our shell as bash. And then we want just guess that didn't work. So I guess I might have typed something wrong. Yes, we forgot to set our as term here. So now if we do we want to set our password for this user, so I want to do this, and now let me type a password in. And now we actually have our password stop. So now we should be able to, and yeah, I did not pick this one as my password, by the way, so you don't have to worry, that's not going to work. So I have not used password for my user, which is of course what I want to have, and now we actually have our user in the actual group. So now we can do groups, and we can see it's actually within the video group, and that's what you want to be in. And yeah, we could, some apps need us to enable adding this use variable. I'm not going to worry about it. So yeah. Now we want to check that our direct rendering works. So we want to do this, and of course we don't have the thing installed. So we can install. We don't have DOS yet. Now I want to do Mesao Progs. And now we want to install this one so we can see, just make sure things work, figure out before things go wrong, if that makes sense. So yeah, it should not take a long time. It's a small package again, and it's pretty much getting itself done. But we want to make sure to get this installed so we can use the GLX info thing. We want to check that our actual, well, I guess it's not able to find display. Well, that's all fine. In not being able to find display, that's a good sign. It just means it's not, it just because running in CH root, it basically means we are fine. And that we don't we don't have a session running, if that makes sense. But it's fine, we are doing just fine, and that's not a bad error message, so we should be fine to go. So now we pretty much have our Xorg and NVIDIA stuff, which means we actually have our software turned to UI. However, we still need to, want to get, a display moment or a display manager. Now, you could not get display manager. You could, use just StartX or BassRC. Not BassRC, but sorry, Axinit. So you could use Axinit, and you could use, just StartX or whatever you want. And you could simply use that to, actually get your, well, desktops running without using a display manager. However, I like using display managers. Using StartX or what the accents and such tends to not do not do me much good. It doesn't give me lower RAM usage, and I prefer having a GUI to log into. So I'm going to install display manager, and my pick is slightly You can install whatever you want. If you want to use STDM, go ahead. If you want to use XDM, go ahead. Use what you want. I'll use LightDM. And we want to install the actual package. So we want to do emerge ask LightDM. And I want to install. And I was going to install a bunch of things, and that's to be expected. So we're just going to let it install those things, and I'll be back after it's done, and then we'll actually get ourselves ready to do further things, I guess. So now we have actually installed LightDM. However, it isn't going to boot into it. So if you go now and boot into our system, it is not going to boot into LightDM. Why? Because we need to configure it to actually do so. And this first very simple. So first we need to look into this file, etc.conf.d display manager. So we want to nano this. Then we want to set our display manager, LightDM. So we want to do this. That's all we need to do for now. And then we need to add dbus into default. So we need to do RC update, which is the way to, it's like opener, it's like systemctl enable or whatever it's called, but for OpenRC. And we need to enable the dbus. And we also need to, of course, add our display manager. Why do we need dbus? Because it handles our, it handles our actual logins. Now, why is this not showing up? Let's just move on from here. This is already done. That's all we need. So now all we have to do is, get ourselves set up with some sort of a desktop and things. So actually, let's get a few things emerged. Let's begin by getting Ice Window Manager, because you want a video manager, of course. Once again, we don't have. Actually, let's emerge DOS first, because we want to be able to run, root commands from our user. So now there's a command we need to enable. So we want to nano -etc -portage /package dot. Okay, let's not do that yet. Let's do package to use. There's something we want to enable here, and we want to also do something like let's say DOS. Then let's find our DOS page, or whatever the package is called, because I don't remember the specific name of the package. So it's called appadmin/DOS, and we want to add this flag called persist. So now, once again, we don't want to do use DOS yet. We want to emerge ask DOS. And as you can see, it still doesn't pick it up. Why does it not pick the flag up even though we enabled it? The answer is very simple, because we need to unmask the package. So we want to use etc portage profile that's use.mask. Okay, we want also, it seems, make the directory for it. So we want to and now I want to edit this one. I want to add minus persist. And now we should be able to, as we can see, we actually unmasked it this time. So we can actually run the persist command here. So we just run this and we install DOS. And there's also a configuration file. It's easy enough, so we can just nano -etc -dos.conf. And what we can do here is we can do permit persist and the wheel. Now we can just run like DOS, and it exists. Another thing we want to install is a window manager of some sort. So let's just emerge ask Ice Window Manager. That's what I use, so that's what we're going to install. Actually, there's something we want to do here. There's an issue with the actual with this version of the window manager. So what we want to do is nano slash etc slash purge. We want to do so it is package.accept. Ah, why does it have to do scrolling thing? I swear. And the display should be correct. So what we can do here is okay, what's our package for ice window manager called to begin with? It's called XWM, okay. So we want to do, I believe the symbol is equals ice window, okay, x11wm slash icevm 2.3.1. Then we want to do AMD64. This is the experimental package thing. So now if we try to install ice window manager, okay, it seems we did something wrong here. A typo. That makes all the sense in the world why it won't work. And now it works. Our version is 2.3.1. And the reason why we're doing this is because 2.2.1 is within the range that has a bugged taskbar, which is tray, so I want to use newer ones. And I'm currently using 2.3.1, so, and I know it works well, so yeah. You probably want to do this if you're using Ice Window Manager because there's big time issues with anything before 2.3. But yeah, I'll once again pause this and come back once I'm done. So now we have actually finished up installing Ice Window Manager. But there's still some things we want to install. For one thing, we want to get terminal. So let's emerge let's say Alacrity because why not? So now we have successfully installed the Alacrity terminal. So now all we have to do is to install Pulse Audio. You can also install like Pipewire or Jack or whatever else you want to install. I'm going to do Pulse Audio because that's the one that's just, you know, I need to use like Steam and things that rely on Pulse Audio. And yeah. So we'll just go ahead and install this, and once again I'll be back once I'm done with that. And this should allow us to actually have audio output, so with this we should be pretty ready to actually, you know, have a working system. Of course I also want to install their power control app to control the volume. Now I have installed or finished compiling the Pulse Audio as well as power control, so I am now ready to actually boot into the new system and see if everything works as intended. So that's the end of this clip, and I'll be showing some footage of the new OS we built and check that everything works properly. So here I am, my boot menu. I will select the Intel one, and this should boot me into my Gentoo system. And now let's see if our actual LightDM works and if everything else works properly. And that's really the point here, to test how well these things are functioning. It seems to be taking a bit to boot, as expected. And as we can see, we have a LightDM working, and we should be able to log right in. And here we have a desktop, and as we can see, we have our Pulse Audio volume control, and we can see we actually have our devices registered, so that means audio works, which is good, it's what we want. We can see we have our NVIDIA settings, as is expected from drivers. We have a terminal, and we can run NeoFetch. And we have really everything we might ever need. So we have our basic system configured, we have, you know, our audio and everything else. So what you have seen here is we have a functional system, and also what we can do is if we do launch our terminal, we might want to grab boot time up because you saw there was the grab menu, so we could simply go to and default grab, so we could simply go here Then we could change our timeout to 0. Then we could save that. Then we could do dos grub mk config o dash boot dash. Okay, we would would have that mount our boot partition as well. So I would need to mount mount. Okay, well I'm getting scrolling. Oh my god, it's so annoying. Why? Dash dev dash nvm e0 and 1 p1 dash boot, and now we can actually do our scrub mkconfig o dash boot dash scrub .cfg. And now if we run this, now we should be able to boot back into this. So let's reboot. I'm presuming this actually doesn't work because we haven't configured the commands in Nice Window Manager for it, but what we can do is just log out and then restart through here. And now we should be able to, if we go to our boot menu, boot without the grub menu. And of course that's a great thing about configuration as well. And you can adjust this timeout to be whatever you want. I just changed to nothing, and as you can see, there's no longer a timeout. So yeah, this is what we want. It's what we want to do, and it's now a fully configured basic system, and we can build upon it. I need to get a new mouse, that's for sure. This one is not working, but yeah, we now have actually the UI here, and that's what matters. So I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope it was helpful.